Hi all, welcome back to another video from the Treasury. As always, DB here, and today I'm going to be coming at you with my top game series that really need to have a sequel. Now, I've seen similar lists, and I thought, you know what, I want to put in my 2 cents, because there's always game series that people seem to leave off of their list that I think are great. Now, some of the games on this list have tentative sequel release dates, but as we all know, including with a few, releases seem to be either pushed back indefinitely or sometimes cancelled. So until I see those games out, since these are really great games in my opinion, I'm going to have them on this list, and I'll make note of it they have a release date. So anyway, let's get into this list. Our first game we're going to look at is MechWarrior. Now, MechWarrior 5 has been scheduled for release this September. However, this has been after several delays over the last few years, so until I see that game out, that's why it's on this list. Now, for those who don't know, MechWarrior is a game where you take the role of a pilot inside of a giant mech, and you go through a series of missions or campaigns. And to me, this series is really kind of on the back burner to a lot of people. It is really a great in-depth game, and to me, out of all the similar type piloting mech games out there, it's the only one in my opinion that really gave me a true sense of actually piloting, say, a 100-ton machine of war, basically. Like some of the other ones, it basically just feels like you're in a shooting game after a while, but this one, the whole franchise has always been really heart-pounding, trying to line up your perfect shot and, stomping around through things. And from the clips that have been released for MechWarrior 5, it looks like it's going to be really great and in-depth. And I can only hope that they keep that same feeling that the previous ones have had. So that's why it's definitely on this list, and I encourage you to check it out. The next game on our list is kind of a guilty pleasure, and it is Rune Factory. Now, Rune Factory 5 has been tentatively announced for some time in 2020. However, this has been after a whole fiasco with the original studio going bankrupt and the name and rights sort of up in limbo, but I'm still hopeful that we'll get to see Rune Factory 5. Now, for those who don't know, it's kind of a game that mixes a Harvest Moon farming simulator with kind of a Dragon Quest Dungeon Hunter. And really, the game series with the great anime-esque style graphics and cutscenes, and really overall tight controls as you get into some of the later ones, it's a game that has always been close to my heart since it came out. And I've been waiting since the release of Rune Factory 4 years and years ago for them to come out with another one. And when I heard that they were finally going to, hopefully, come out with one, I thought, this is great. But until they do, this series has always been on my list of most wanted sequels. And for those who don't know the series, I really invite you to check it out if it's something like, dungeon crawling or sim type experience is something you like. So that's why it's on this list also. Our next game series is Metroid Prime. Now I figure I'll just go ahead and get all the games that have had tentative releases for sequels out of the way first. Now, Metroid Prime 4, which is supposed to be released sometime in 2020 at the moment, is hopefully going to be a great entry into this whole franchise. Now, there's no information on Metroid Prime 4, so until we get more, we don't even know if it will come out. But the Metroid Prime series, who don't know about it, is basically a really good first-person shooter type version of the Metroid series, rather than the 2D side-scrolling shooter. And when it was released, the first Metroid Prime, it was a huge smash hit. I mean, the game introduced you to a great, vibrant world with the whole Metroid cast and universe in it. And really, I thought it was actually a very well done take. And the two games that followed it were really good entries into that series. They had a few issues with them, but overall nothing that I would say definitely doesn't deserve to have another one in that. And so I am really looking forward to hopefully seeing Metroid Prime 4 within the next year to year and a half. The next game we're going to talk about is Catherine. Now, as many of you might be able to tell, I love anime type games, and I also love story-driven games. And to me, while the gameplay of Catherine was never one that was up my alley, I've never been, overly fond of puzzle type games. The whole aspect of the game really kind of got me interested. And to me, it really needs a sequel. Now, before people start saying, well, there's got a full body sequel coming, it's not a true sequel in my opinion. It's more of a remake of the first one with added content. And to me, I don't call that a sequel. I'll call it 1.5 if anybody really wants to push me on it. But to me, for spoilers of the first one, I won't give any other than the fact that the first one has 3 possible main endings. And to me, I would really like to see a sequel that follows each of these 3 different endings and where the overall ending will end up. Because really, when you think of the first one and anybody who's actually watched those 3 endings, really, you can kind of almost leave the ending open to wondering what's going to go next. So I think a sequel for each of those would be really great. It doesn't have to be 3 separate games, but a sequel in some kind following the first one would be a really good take, especially since I really want to know what happens, to all the characters in the future. The next game we're going to talk about is a very underrated one, and that is Okami. Now, when this game came out, I found it had a very unique and very Japanesey art style and gameplay to it. And while I first thought I wasn't really going to find it interesting, I ended up really, really enjoying the game overall. I mean, the art style is a little different to get into, but it reminds you of a very, very old, Meiji area type art style. And eventually the whole game and aspect of it was really interesting. And to me, I would really, really love to have a sequel that sort of follows the exploits of Amaterasu and everybody else. And so that is why, to me, it's always been a game that, in my opinion, deserves a sequel just because of the fact that it was so good and yet very underrated. Very underrated. I really encourage you to check out Okami if you haven't already. Now we're going to get into a game that had a critically acclaimed opening and release, and yet has yet to have a sequel to it, and that is Vanquish. Now, Vanquish came out in 2010, and for those who don't know it, or have never even heard about it, it is a game where you take the role of a soldier basically given a super suit. Now, this may sound similar to many other games, and that is possibly why it didn't really get the recognition it deserves upon release. But the overall direction, cinematics, control style, and gameplay were actually very unique to games, in the same genre. And it really had a very unique and compelling storyline, and one that is kind of relevant in today's, global climate. But overall, it really did set a very interesting precedent for gameplay, and yet it had its flaws, like a very short campaign and all that, but it really is one that really deserves a sequel, at least to try and follow up and find out what happens to all of our characters, because the game ended on such a cliffhanger that it almost needs a sequel to find out or figure out what happened. And that's why it's definitely on this list. The next game series we're going to talk about that needs a sequel is Deus Ex. Now, I know people will say, well, there was just a sequel a couple of years ago, but to me, while it was a good sequel, it still left a little bit to be desired. And to me, another one to really close up the franchise with Adam Jensen would really be great. I mean, the first Deus Ex, going back years and years and years ago, was really a very interesting mishmash of, conspiracy, aliens, Illuminati, secret conspiracies, and all this. And it really was a very interesting, groundbreaking game at the time. Now, when Deus Ex, the second one came out, it really introduced a very unique character in Adam Jansen, and really, it had a very great storyline, play style, art direction, everything was really spot on with that game. Now, when the last one, Mankind Divided, came out, it really kind of didn't really delve in depth like the second one did. And to me, they really left a little bit on the table. They had so much direction they could have gone, and they really, didn't go there. So to me, the game series is just really good. I really like the main character, and it definitely needs to have at least a fourth one to finish up the trilogy of Adam Jansen and to try and figure out where things go. We're going to finish up this video with another series that doesn't get a lot of love, but I love it, and that's Star Fox. Now, when Star Fox came out, it was, in my opinion, a very great fight 'em up space shooter. And for those who don't know the Star Fox series, you take the role of basically Fox McCloud, who is basically a pilot slash soldier who is trying to, defeat, the evil Andross and save the galaxy. Now, as the series progressed, it got a little bit of flack for going too many different routes. I mean, it went from a really great space fighter game in Star Fox 64 to a game that people didn't like in Star Fox Adventure, where it was basically a Legend of Zelda-esque type game. But I really did actually like that style of game, and I actually found Star Fox Adventures to be pretty good. I almost wish they had a sequel to it where they really delve in depth of the game mechanics and overall quality of the picture to clear up some of the polygons. And then they still went on trying to re-innovate different ideas of how to play, the space fighter. Sometimes as we get into Command, which was the second last one, it really kind of dropped the ball in that they tried to go too far. But overall, Star Fox has a great cast of characters. I really did love it when they introduced Crystal to be the female lead to Fox McCloud, because I always really love the dynamic play between, of romance between in fighting games or space shooters or any series in general. And I really miss her being a part of the team, and I really do want to see an actual true sequel that really brings all these nice characters and world combined back together. And anybody who says it can't be done, look at the downloadable content for Starlink. I mean, the Star Fox content in that game was groundbreaking. It looked gorgeous. I mean, if they take that and translate it into like basically another actual Star Fox game, it would be gorgeous, and they really need to do that. So that's why this game will be on this list and why we're ending on it. And I really encourage you to check out the Star Fox series. It's just a great series. Well, there you have it, folks. That's my list for the top games that really need a sequel. Now, I'm sure you have your own game that you'd like to have a sequel of. Put it in the comments below. Let us know what it is. And as always, thanks for watching. Hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll see you all next time on a video from the Treasury. Have a good night, all.